Do just what you want. You're the one I trust, and I always be around when I need some loving, baby. No one else. Let you down. Take me to your heart. I belong to you. Take me to your soul. No one
Hello, good morning, good morning. I love that last scene with my buddy Jamie and I. I love that last scene. My buddy Jamie came over from the UK, and yeah, it was actually a pretty special moment. Good Saturday morning to you. Good Saturday morning to you. Welcome to Podcasters Live, Saturday Live Training. We are stoked to talk to you today. The subject that we are going to be talking about today has been in high demand. I was just talking to our guests off stage. I was talking to him about like the Saturday Live trainings. I love doing these so much. I love doing the live podcasts, and I love recording audio podcasts as well. I love both of those. I love these because I can take a subject that's kind of hot or that's just kind of, top of mind in various communities, and I can just talk about it. And I can just start to, create some content around it. But more importantly, it answers your question rather quickly than you having to wait for me to actually create a complete episode around it. So today we are going to be talking about the top 5 podcast analytics. I'm really excited to talk to you about that today, and we will be talking about that right after this. All right. Here's one thing. Before I introduce my guest, I'm going to let you know this real quick too. I feel like I got a pretty decent voice, for podcasting and stuff like that. But wait till you hear the voices of my 2 guests. I'm telling you right now, their voices are amazing, and this is why they have one of the best podcasts that are out there in marketing in the Philippines. So just wanted to kind of tease that a little bit. Just want to welcome everybody that's listening and connecting with us over on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for being here. We truly appreciate that. Make sure you put your comments and your questions inside of the chat. Everybody over on Facebook, thank you so much. We have a really thriving community over there on Facebook, Podcasters Live. We are Podcasters Live everywhere, including on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is growing exponentially, so thank you for everybody that's actually been connecting with us over there as well. A couple other things. Monday, I'm super stoked about this. Monday, I will be speaking on a live stream. We're going to be talking about pod fade. I'm going to be speaking to the content marketing world community live, and I think it's just going to be on LinkedIn, and it's going to be 12 o'clock on Monday. So make sure you go ahead and check us out, for that. We're going to be talking about live streaming. We're going to talk about podcasting, and also kind of give us some tips on that dreaded thing we call pod fade. In June, I'm pretty stoked. I'm going to be talking about my upcoming book, How to Be in Podcaster Syndrome, at the Marketing for the Culture in Houston, Texas. Make sure you get your tickets. We will have a link in the description. But also, if you're looking at this on a replay, if you're looking at this live, you want to get tickets, the QR code is right there for you. And then last but not least, as we go through here and you are struggling with ideas around your content, around your podcast, anything that you may be thinking about that you want to do differently, we are here to help you with that at Podcasters Live. Our focus is to help you move past, some of the challenges that you face and make sure that you are, winning with your podcast and also your live stream. So you can connect with us at Podcasters Live. We have a 90-minute power sessions, but we can also provide a concept to creation process for your entire podcast idea. All right. So here's the thing. These guys have been on the show before. We had an amazing show. I think it was January. What we were doing international podcast days, and we did a 5-panel. We actually had 5 people on that day from the Philippines, and they are amazing. They're super smart. Make sure you come with your questions and comments because, like I said, they know what they're talking about. I wouldn't have them on the show if they didn't know what they were talking about. So, without further ado, I want to introduce. How are you guys, PJ, Neri, and then Mr. Brian? How are you doing? Hold on for a second. I got to do something. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. There you go. There you go. Oh, we got dueling roadcaster pros going on.
Yeah.
That's a popular sound here in the Philippines, especially for noontime shows, right?
Oh
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Speaking of noontime, for us in the States, I got my cup of coffee. If you, hopefully people out here and you got the cup of coffee, but you guys don't have a cup of coffee because it's not morning over there.
We're having tea
Yeah. It's
in a
like
short while.
I have water, ever
Yeah.
reliable water.
Nice. Well,
Speaking
hey,
of voice, Steve
yes.
is just being modest here. He has a very good voice, like really,
He,
really
he
good
just said
voice.
that. He just said that in the beginning of the show. If you were
Yeah,
listening to
he's
him.
got
I
a
have a very nice voice, but
No,
these guys
dude,
might
I
have
didn't
some
say
nice
it that way. I didn't say it that way. I didn't say I didn't
no,
say it
but
that
really,
way.
you have a very good voice.
No, no, listen to me. You guys, I'm PJ. I remember our first meeting. I think I even told you that, right? And we were on the call and you were like, "Hello, Steve." I was like, who is that? And then I got to meet Brian, and Brian's like, "Hey, Steve, how are you doing?" I'm like, "Dude, you guys, you guys got rock star podcast voiceover voices going on, man."
But having said that as well, I mean, for those who are watching, well, it's a plus that you have a very, like a voice of a DJ's voice, but it's not a requirement. So just to be clear, it's not a
It's not.
requirement for you to have a DJ voice to be able to start a podcast. So
It's
if
not.
you're watching, if you are thinking about doing a podcast, do it.
Do it. Do it. Funny story before we get to your introductions. I had the pleasure of being on your podcast, but I remember that day when we were about to record, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the mic set up right, and my voice was coming from my earbuds, and and PJ was like, "Steve, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we may need to reschedule. Like your voice isn't sounding right. You're supposed to be talking about podcasts, and your voice just doesn't sound right." And I was like, what were you talking about? I thought I had the mic plugged in, but I didn't, and it was just coming from somewhere else. And it was just a funny story. She's like, "Okay, we may have to reschedule this," but I got it. I got it sorted. I got it sorted. All right, PJ, tell everybody about who you are and what you do, and then we're gonna flip it over to Brian.
First of all, thank you, Steve, for having us here again on Podcasters Live. It's always a pleasure. So, hi everyone. My name is Princess Jasmine Jur Chongson Neri. That's a mouthful, so I'm more known as PJ Neri with my circle of friends. I am a podcast producer and the co-founder of Visioneri Media. We are podcast agency, and we serve visionaries, coaches, thought leaders, and experts, and we help them launch and rank their podcasts, and as well as retain listeners through the power of stories. So I was a former flight attendant. I'm also a mom, and now in the audio world. Well, I was a DJ back then as well, and then now I'm into podcasting. So very similar worlds, radio and podcasting, and I'm really excited to be here again. Always a pleasure and a treat to be here on Steve's show. So
Dude,
back to
hold up,
you, Steve.
DJ. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a DJ for this radio station here in the Philippines in Baguio. It's called 96.7 K Light.
That just
So I
makes too much
did some
sense.
ads as well. Yeah. Birds of the same feather flock together. You see, Brian was a DJ as well in the past, and I'm assuming you were as well, Steve.
I
You were,
was, I
right?
was,
You worked in radio.
I did for a little
See?
period
We're
of
the
time.
same bird.
For a
See,
little period of time, Mister
Mhm.
Award-winning documentary guy over here, Brian. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Tell them about. Do you still have? Do you have the award with you? Like you can hold it up?
no, I don't. Not here. It's somewhere there, far in my room. But anyway, hi everyone. My name is Brian Brusas. I'm a podcast producer, at the same time co-founder as well of the Visioneri Media, where we produce the Visionary podcast with. I do it with PJ. I'm the producer behind the scene, while PJ is producer in front. She does the hosting. I do the back end production as well. And so, yeah, I've been in the creative industry since the late, I don't know, 1990s, I guess. So I started in radio as well, just like PJ back then. And I end up in the podcasting world in back in 2007 when it was very new.
Hmm.
We were in the same country when I started that. We were in Dubai. Me and PG. She was a flight attendant back then when I met her, and there I was in a totally different world. I was in the financial services. She was my client, and I was there. But despite being in the financial service industry, my being creative just still led me into radio. While I was doing that as my main job, I had a chance to promote that job in a local radio station there. So I was
Okay.
like doing a radio show that helps Filipinos there to know more about finances and so on and so forth. So yeah,
Nice.
uh,
Man.
so just to cut the story short, we end up meeting again like 2 years ago during the pandemic, and then we just hit it up, and yeah, we come up with the Visionary Media. So we're here to share our experiences based on the topic today, and we're pretty excited, always excited to be a guest of Steve's show. It's an honor. It's always a fun and valuable conversation that you get whenever you talk to Steve. There will never be any dull moments. I don't know with you guys listening to us, but when we guys are talking, we're just like having fun, and I hope you will be doing the same when you're hearing this or when you're watching
Agreed.
this podcast.
Agreed, man. Well, thank you, sir. We want to, before we move into the tips, we want to make sure we say hello to everybody. How are you doing? Flow with Joe podcast. There you go. I like that name. Good morning, good morning, Florence. How are you doing? Equip Institute. Here's we got the troublemaker in the house. We got the troublemaker in the house.
Oh, hi, Cher.
The troublemaker
Hi there,
extraordinaire.
Cher.
I love that. That's right. That's right. That's right. This is PJ and those guys already been trying to steal it. Like, dude, send me one of those. Send me one. Send me one. I'm like, yo, no, I can't do it. Can't do it. My first time here. Excited for the info. Thank you so much. I'm glad. I'm so glad you're here. Glad you're. We're gonna be diving in. But I always want to make sure I engage with everybody as well too before we dive in, because we got a lot of stuff that we want to talk about here this morning. And then the last piece to share says, yeah, that part, the voice is not a requirement. All right. So I do want to talk a little bit about, we are going to be talking about the five, we're going to be talking about the five uh, top, if you will, not really top, but kind of just our five, if you will. But we're going to have some honorable mentions of different podcast analytics and statistics that people need to kind of know and think about. But before we do get into those, we wanted to talk a little bit, set the groundwork for a couple things. The best place, you'll see it as we kind of go through the list, the best place to get a lot of your stats is going to be one of your podcast hosts, but also through Spotify and Apple Connect. Those, I'm just gonna like put that out there right now. However, these are two amazing sites where you can actually get podcast different analytics. PJ, could you talk a little bit about like listen notes? And then, Brian, I'll probably have you talk a little bit about Chartable, or you can go vice versa, however you want to do it, just to kind of let everybody know what they are and how you guys use them with yourself and also with your clients.
Hi there again, Steve. So, for those listening or for those who are watching, on the screen, you can see Listen Notes and Chartable. So, Listen Notes, if you go to their website, it's the best podcast search engine. So, when you search your favorite shows or even your own show there, you will see, of course, the episodes also that you've done, if you have a community, all those information. And you will also be seeing, if you are at the top 0.1% of the podcasts in the world, your listening score and things like that. These information, they're really good to know as well. Like, for example, Steve, his podcast, retail leadership, was the global 10%. So it's a very big thing when you know that, because it's like a badge as well.
I'll take that.
I
I'll take
love
that.
that.
Thank you.
So of course it's like a badge of honor, or it's something to really brag about, to be really proud of all the hard work you've done when you do podcasting. So promoting this or informing your audience about this as well is also very important, so they know that, oh, okay, so you're at this. It's not just because like you're one of the best, but it also feels good. Come on, like it feels good that you are at the very, like, at the top global 10%. So it means that you are doing very well with your show. People are resonating with your content, and that's like a feather in your cap as well. So the higher you go, it means that you're really doing so well and getting better at your craft, which is
Agreed.
podcasting. So listen
Agreed.
notes.
Agreed. Go ahead. Brian's knocking stuff over. Go ahead,
Sorry
Brian.
about that. The tea is just hot.
Oh.
Thanks to PJ, she sent me those teas over. But it's just delicious. So I'm having tea because we just had dinner. So yeah, just to add on that, those two popular sites for podcast analytics, Listen Notes, really, yeah. I just quickly, when I heard the applause, I just quickly searched retail leadership with Steve Wordy. Indeed, 10% top 10 global rank, listen score 29. That means he's on top. So it's a good, it's a good. It's like Google of podcasting. That's
Yeah.
what they call
Yeah.
it.
That's
Listen
good.
Notes is Google podcasting. It's good to know, and you can also look into same kind of podcast that you do. This is very useful, really, if you're, especially if you're launching a show or relaunching a show. It's good to know who among your space you have the same kind of podcast. Are
Yeah.
you having the same kind of listeners as well? So that's something that you can take note of.
Yeah.
And Chartable,
Mm.
they gave us very detailed analytics as well, that would go hand in hand with your analytics and your local, or I mean your your platform that you use for hosting, your hosting platform, whether it may be Buzzsprout or Podbean or Substack or whatever you're using. uh, this can go hand in hand because it gives you a sort of a summary as well of where are you hitting good. It gives you a side by side comparison of Spotify stats and Apple podcast stats.
Mhm.
If especially if your podcast have already been have gone into like more than 10 or 20 episodes down the road. So the these data we will discuss later in our top five are very useful. We can use these analytics or these metrics to improve or even you know try to analyze what's going on with
Mm,
our podcast compared to the rest of the podcasts out there.
yeah, I think the main takeaway for everybody in the audience is not just is like we all love podcasting. We either like to record it, we like to edit it. Some people don't like to edit. I don't like to edit, but we love we love the medium. But for you to be successful in whatever your measurement of success is, you need analytics, you need data, right? You can't say, yo, my podcast is dope, and then you look at some of the analytics and it's like, ooh, maybe not so much, right? Or you're like, oh, I think it's okay. And then you look at it and you're like, whoa, dang, I didn't know I was doing so well, right? But it also gives you more information on how to actually create, better and better content. The listen notes and Chartable. I remember when I started back podcasting in 2007, I wanted to see where I ranked in the world, and then I didn't have um, enough episodes first and for Chartable. So then when I started to get more and more episodes, then it started to kind of like it's kind of primed the pump, and it showed me where I was. And so just making sure that you're being consistent with your overall content, and then utilize a balance of like listen notes, chartables, and some of the things that we're going to be talking about here. The first one that I want to talk about, we want to talk about, is just a subscriber count, right? So I got some information on here as well too, but I really just want to focus in on like what it is. It's the number of individuals who have chosen to subscribe. Subscribers typically receive automatic downloads, and we'll be talking about downloads here in a sec. Brian, from your perspective, when you guys are working with a client, right? Do you when you look at subscriber count, what is some of the things that it actually will tell you about the podcast and possibly about the content that this person is putting out?
Yeah, this is a very good metric that we need to look at when you say subscriber count, because especially if you're starting out, it can be intimidating to start from. Of course, everybody starts at zero, right? So when you get your episode out there at the very first week or very first few days, not a lot of people know about it, especially if you're just very new in the industry, and you're just getting it out there without. Some people just don't plan. I want to make a podcast. I'll record. I'll publish out there. So um, getting this data in mind will keep you progressing forward in making, as you mentioned, better and better episodes, because you will know exactly if you will know if your marketing efforts, if ever there are
Mm-hmm,
efforts that you
mm-hmm.
did, are working, right? Because there are many ways, and we can, that's a totally different topic, but we can look into efforts in social media postings,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
maybe email newsletter marketing, that will be able to give you a subscriber count, because in these ways of marketing, you'll be able to attract or invite listeners of your specific audience or your target audience to come in and listen and subscribe, because some people may just be listening but they're not subscribed, so there's totally different
Mm-hmm.
things. So that's something to really look into as well.
Yeah, and all of you who are in the audience, if you have a question or comments, or if you've been looking into your own subscriber count or any of these other analytics that we'll be talking about, and if you have a question or a concern or whatever, make sure you put that in in the chat, because we want to make sure you leave here with as much information as possible so that you can move forward. PJ, I know you and I have been working together for a year or so now, and you've been helping me with Podcasters Live, and then also with retail leadership with Steve Worthy. But you also have your own amazing podcast that's dare I say, like top three in the Philippines for marketing. And I remember you posted something where you beat Chris Doe. Those of you who don't know who Chris Do is, you go and research Chris Do, rock star in marketing, and has an amazing podcast. And their podcast beat out Chris Do. In the top
Twice.
and twice.
Twice.
Whoa.
She was like, "Yo, dude, like, yo, put some respect on my name,
This should be
Steve.
a highlight. Steve.
Put some
Hi,
respect on my
Chris.
name."
Yeah.
Not just once, but twice. My bad, my bad, BJ, my bad. When you were starting your podcast, how much did you focus on the subscriber count aspect?
You know what, Steve? When I think about subscribers, I think about building a community.
Yeah,
Because once a person,
yeah,
that act of subscribing to a podcast, they want more. They want to listen more. They want to get to know you. So having that subscriber like commit to you or like decide to listen to you, it's a start of a beautiful relationship.
hmm
So
hmm
what of course when you're starting, of course when we also started, you don't get a lot um right away because
right,
you have to,
right,
right? Like imagine the subscriber as yourself, as a human being. When you like something, you get interested, you get intrigued, and then you subscribe, right? It's like when you're also watching YouTube channels, when you're very interested, then you subscribe because you want more. So when you're the one who's creating the show, every subscriber out there counts, whatever number you have,
hmm
because it's they're there, they already express that they want more, they want to get to know you more, and so you give it to them, and you have to be very consistent. It's very hard as well, for podcasters to be consistent, but you really have to. Steve,
hmm
you touched on pod fade earlier, right? Because it can happen, it will happen, but always think about that commitment that you have for those who are listening, for those who clicked subscribe. You have to give it to them because they will be expecting it. They will want more from you. So you have to give it to them. So it's a start of a beautiful relationship. It's a start of a community.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's something that you really have to give your all and make sure that they're happy and that the content that you create resonates with them.
Yeah, agreed. I think the worst thing that I've experienced in podcasting is when you like a show and you're subscribed to that show, and because typically it'll automatically download right into your listening app or whatever, and then you kind of look, you're like, dude, where's that podcast, like, and then you go back and you look, they haven't put out an episode in months. I'm speaking for myself as well. So I think, like Peter was talking about, the subscriber count, there's almost a measure of like commitment that you've kind of unconsciously made with that person, and I know that things happen in life, and I completely understand that. But I think that's the piece that we kind of have to think about, just like Peter talking about the community side of it, is that, but there's a connection, there's a person connected to that subscriber, to that subscription, right? And they're really looking forward to hearing your information, connecting with you. So make sure that you are doing whatever you can to put that content out there. And then also marketing efforts. What marketing efforts are you, I think Brian mentioned earlier, what marketing efforts are you utilizing to grow your podcast? And if you start to see your subscriber count go up, then possibly you can tie that to some of your marketing efforts as well too. All right, number two, the dreaded. Oh, my fault. I love downloads. I'm not gonna say the dreaded download, but as most of you know, and I know, and Peter and Brian know about me, I am not anti-download. I'm pro-consumption. I'm pro-listen time. I'm so downloads matter, right? Maybe I should put that. I should put the downloads matter or something like that. But let's talk about downloads per episode. And the reason I talk a little bit more about it in depth, and because you can see what I have written there in blue. aspirational acquired knowledge, right? So, and we'll talk more a little bit about that because then it's the number of times an episode has been downloaded by a listener, right? It's the episode, if you're a subscriber, automatically when you upload something via RSS, goes into your to the directory, and automatically gets downloaded into your listening app. Doesn't necessarily mean that they listen to it, but the download piece, man, it has been the number one topic from a marketing standpoint for years. And PJ, I'm going to start back. I'm going to start with you and then go to Brian on this one. So downloads, how important are they, in this world of podcasting? And just give me your perspective. I'm going to ask Brian something a little different.
Like you, Steve, I'm pro consumption because downloads, I compare this, just imagine it's like a Facebook like essentially, right? It's the more likes you have, the more sponsors and advertisers would want to work with you because you have like this much likes, right? So it's very similar with downloads. But like Steve, as you mentioned, it's a download doesn't necessarily mean that they listen to it. So it's like a Facebook like. They liked it, but that's not necessarily that they read the whole post, right? Maybe it's just the image that they like that made them decide to click like. So it could be a vanity metric, but a lot of advertisers, sponsors, unfortunately, this is also one of the metrics that they look for,
Yeah.
downloads.
Yeah.
But again, when as I said earlier, when you start a podcast, it's a commitment and it's building a community. So you might not have millions of downloads,
Right. Right.
but it's not the end of the world because you can still vie for sponsorships because there are also companies or sponsors who are willing to sponsor you know um shows who don't have millions of downloads. It's
Yeah.
like similar to micro influencers, right?
Yeah.
So the more niche you are, it doesn't matter. I mean, you might not have like millions of people in your community, but they are very engaged.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
So I compare it to that.
Yeah. I like that piece around the engagement piece. You were just talking about. I did a reel, and it's actually been doing really well. And what I mean by really well for me is that people are actually engaging with it. They're commenting. They've saved it. They've shared it. Right. So it's not just that they liked it. They're actually doing something with that reel. So if you think about downloads in that context, it's like people will like it, but are they actually doing something with it? A subscription is almost a subscriber is almost kind of like a like in the context of like when the download comes in, it goes into your player, but what are they doing with it as well too? Brian, what's your thoughts on downloads per episode?
Yeah, totally agreed. And this term has evolved through the years. When we started out way back in 2007, it's the actual downloading of the episode to your
100%.
to your it was iPod before, there was no smartphones during those times, but it evolved into streams. So you might be confused when you look into your analytics board dashboard, whether it may be in Spotify or in Apple Podcasts or your hosting platform analytics dashboard, that it will tell you number of streams. So this is basically the same now. There's like integration between stream and download, because you don't need to download really to listen to an episode. You just have to stream it over because you have internet with you. So I totally agree, and we're the three of us here are on the same page in saying that though this is more of like a vanity metric, that people would say that, oh, this is a popular podcast because you've got lots of download, but it will not tell you exactly that those people have done, because to be technical about this, download is between 0 to 6 seconds of people clicking on your episode. So as PG said, it's the same as liking, but without reading your Facebook or LinkedIn post, right? You may have like a very long post. They like it because he is your friend, or something like that, right? So uh, for in a business perspective, yes, that matters because this is a popular show, and it when it's a popular show, it easily gets attracted with like searchability, as we mentioned earlier. So it
Yeah,
can easily be
yeah,
searched because you're popular. It brings you up in the rankings. But in terms of building a long-term community, and when you mentioned about commitment, and you want to so there are two ways of looking at this. If either you want to compete with the big boys,
hmm hmm
you might want to go with the download thing. But if you want to build your own, you don't have to have a very big community, but something that is committed and loyal, the word is loyal to you, then I would be better off, or we would be better off looking into the engagement and the
yes,
quality and the consumption time, that our listeners are, because that truly is for us, which we will discuss later, something that you might want to consider. But again, totally agree that this is a very good metric to look into,
yeah.
because it gives you a little bit of presence, popularity, and all that. But it's not the end of the world if you don't have a lot of downloads.
Yeah. Now, okay. Now, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this from all three of us, because I'm going to say this because it's going to sound like I'm talking out the side, like we're talking out the side of our necks. We still do look at downloads, like, so don't get it twisted. Do not get it twisted. We are not sitting here and say that we don't look at downloads. We don't look at where we are. I'm not saying that at all. It is a metric that you do look at, right? When we put out a new episode, I look at it because I do want to know how it's doing, right? But I think I look at it not just from the day that I publish it, but I look at all my downloads, 3, 4, 5 days, 6 days after the published date, because now that lets me know people are kind of engaging with, my current podcast, but they're also they're engaging with my back catalog, right? So you start to think about downloads. You think about the downloads from that initial new episode that you publish, but when you look at downloads and I look at my back catalog, I'm like, okay, people are actually they're downloading it because they're engaging with it. It's not because I just published it. I published that 2 months ago, and now they're downloading it. That means that they're actually doing something with it. So there is kind of this pull and push and pull as it relates to downloads. So I wanted us to we could talk about of course pro consumption we can talk about here in a second, but we do look at them. All right.
It's
So
not
just
the sole metric, Steve.
yeah,
I just want to add,
yeah.
downloads, it's not the only metric. So there are a lot. I mean, there are a lot of things to look at. So because people get so fixated with it, there are so
Oh,
many things you have to look into, not just downloads.
dude, 100%, 100%. All right, this is the third one here. Oh man. So these it's like one and we're going to talk about the two different ones, right? Because there's a difference between listen time and consumption, right? Listen time is the total duration of time that a listener spends actively engaging with the podcast, right? And that's typically measured in like hours or minutes, right? Associated with with your podcast, and we felt that it was good to give you an example, and then we can just kind of talk through it. You see all of the pros and cons and all of that stuff, but here's an example. Our good friend Jamie, his podcast is ridiculous. So his stuff is like he's like, his podcast is like the one that skews the test. Like the test, the curve on your test, right? Everybody's kind of doing getting a C. Right, his joint's like A, and it's like, dude, you just made the medium of the test scores higher, but he's doing an amazing job with his podcast. I think he gets like 14,000 per month downloads, but he I introduced him a little bit to listening time and consumption, and so he did some digging into his own podcast. And if you can see, I don't know if you guys could probably see my thing here or not, but I am over here, and I am looking at the total listened, and he has 21,400 hours of listen time, right? And I have some thoughts about this, but I want to make sure I connect with you guys. When you guys see this, what are your some of your immediate thoughts, Brian, when you see this metric and some of these results that not just Jamie has, but how this can impact someone else if they go into Apple Connect and actually get this information?
So these are all good information. Again, you mentioned just quickly earlier that this is totally, there's a difference between time listen and consumption, and the way people can, because this is like the total number of hours that
Yeah.
people have listened to the podcast. So you would also want to consider, when looking at this data, you might also want to consider the average minutes of
Yeah.
your per
Yeah.
episode podcast. So that's something to understand. Like, you have, maybe your podcast is on an average 1 hour per episode, or maybe 30 minutes. So knowing that would tell you, i- just by looking at the numbers, like how many uh hours of your podcast that people listen to all throughout the time. So that would give you an idea that people really, if you're like, say for instance, your podcast average is like maybe an hour, just for easy computation, that will mean like, you got like 21,000 hours. So that would, most of the time, these people have listened to your podcast all throughout. I mean, have
Yeah.
completed
Yeah.
listening to the whole episode, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
it wouldn't be that much hours if they just listen for 6 seconds, or we're looking at the downloads part that we discussed earlier, right? So that matters really. So you have to look into those data, and that is why time listen is very much or closely related to consumption,
Yeah.
which we will look into later. But again, this is something that would, me, for us as a podcaster, would make you proud, and would give you that uh that lift, that hey, we did a good job because people are listening all throughout. And then, yeah, that's something to look forward to.
100%. PJ?
When I look at these numbers, I mean, this is very impressive for Jamie. At the end of the day, you want to produce content that your audience will binge on.
Mm,
So,
mm, mm.
having this much hours, it tells you something that, oh, they really binge on your content, and
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
the goal. You
Yeah.
want your community to
Yeah.
binge on it, not just listen to one. Like, that's why we do season planning, episode planning, because we want our audiences to binge on our content. Not just to have a one hit wonder.
Yeah.
As we call it in music, right? We want them to binge. And this metric is very important, so that we we plan out your episode strategically, and think about the cost, the what do you call this, the listener's experience, that when they like this, they will also like this, they will also like this. That's why
Yeah.
CTAs are also very important. Whenever you do your reads on your podcast, or even promote it on social media, because you just don't promote that specific episode, you want them to binge on your other episodes as well, and this help get you as much listen time for your podcast.
Yeah. I was just listening to something the other day, and they were talking about um we were talking about like a business strategy, and people will change up their business strategy every month because they're not seeing any type of progress or within that, right? I fell victim to that myself as well, and I think we see that a little bit in podcasting, where you may start out and you don't get the listens, you don't get the subscribers, you don't get everything that you want up front, right? And then you end up pod fading. The other aspect of what I see here is is Jamie's measurement of consistency, but also to PJ's point around planning, right? Any of you who've ever met Jamie, he is, and I have tried to be there, and PJ's tried to help me, but sometimes I go astray. He is 3 to 4 months ahead of like his recording, which is crazy. It's just insane. So he doesn't really have to worry about, I got a podcast that I got to release next week, and now he's recording it this weekend. He's editing it. He doesn't have to worry about that. Now, I just use that as an example because when we start to think about, this medium that we all love, podcasting, you have to have a plan. You have to have a process. But also, it's going to take some time in order for you to see some of the results, that you're going to go after. The last piece I want to make, or point I want to make on this one, is, Jamie is in a process now, of course, of like, getting advertisement and different things like that for his podcast. All these stats are amazing stats in order to bring to a potential sponsor and say, hey, Jamie's podcast is super niche. It's for developers for .core, net.core. Like, it's super niche. Like, it is the niche of the niches from a technology standpoint. And for him to have 14,000 downloads per month, that lets you know that if you are trying to be super broad with it, right, with your content, you have to kind of narrow your focus. Just my own little thing on that one, real quick. All right, this is my jam right here. This one is my jam. We got a couple more. Thank you guys for sticking with us. If you have any questions, some thoughts or concerns, or anything that you guys may be struggling with your own podcast, please make sure you put it in the comments as well, because we want to make sure we answer any questions. Consumption measures how much of your episodes listeners are actually listening to. And once again, I call this acquired knowledge, meaning that they are actually engaging and listening to your comments and to your stuff. What say you, PJ, about consumption?
About consumption, I'm with you on this one. Even Brian, we are very much like, pro consumption. I remember this research on NPR by Nick DePrey, and they said that you lose 20 to 30% of your listeners in the first 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So consumption, a lot of factors come into play. Since we want our audiences to binge on our content, we really have to, create a listener avatar, because once you have that, then you plan out your episodes that would really, you know, s- would really resonate with your target listener. And so when we do have that, you plan out as well your hooks. You like, how are you going to start the episode? How
Yeah,
are you going
yeah.
to tease your listener until the very end? Because we want them to be on that journey with us, not just in the very beginning where, a lot of people just do clickbaits, on the net. We want them to be with us on the entirety of the ride.
Mm,
Because how does that benefit us? You build a more solid with your listener. They get more familiar with you, and when they get more familiar with you, then they trust you more. And if you have a very engaged audience, again, you attract more advertisers for you, more sponsors. Because
mm-hmm,
if say let's say you are a sponsor, you want to sponsor this podcast, but then your ad is in the mid roll,
mm,
but the listeners already drop off in the first 3 or 5 minutes,
yeah,
then it's a waste of your investment, right? You want to advertise or sponsor a show where listeners are engaged from start to finish. So that's why consumption is very important. And that's why planning structure is very important in planning your episodes.
yeah, 100%. Go ahead, Brian. You chomping at the bit, man.
Yeah, because I I totally agree with that, and this is a metric that we really love to look at every time that we produce an episode, or we publish an episode. So uh, getting into the technical uh, details of listener uh, consumption, this it's also related to retention, how you retain, as
Yes.
PJ mentioned, how you
Yes.
retain your listeners all throughout. So uh, planning again is very crucial there. And when you look into this metric or the data that you see on your dashboard, you are able to, if you didn't do any planning at all, because again, most of us, sometimes when we want to get into this business, we don't really care, we just want to push record and do our podcast. So if you're in
Yeah.
that situation right now, listening to us and watching this live, when you look into this data or this metric, you will see there the drop offs, like which points
Yes.
did the listener drop, maybe at the 15-minute mark, the at the 5 minute. Here's a good example. So here, with Steve's episode, as you can see, all throughout there was no drop off. They only drop off. That was the outro part. It was like a minute, I think. So probably
Mm.
they're done with the episode. It was just like an outro saying, or maybe Steve was doing a joke at the end, so they drop off. So I'm sorry, Steve, but yeah,
That's all.
that
That's all
happens
right.
sometimes.
That's all right. No.
So as you can see there, uh, this is a very good, I mean, data to look at, right? And knowing that, and wanting to improve your podcast moving forward, maybe you need to consider the format. What format will I use to be able to retain my listeners all throughout? So the good point there is a hook, and a hook,
Mhm.
and this is all part of a good story. So you may want to consider storytelling in an interview format, or whatever. So this is something that you can, with this data on hand, you are able to improve your episodes moving forward, and again, attract sponsors, as PJ mentioned. So this is pretty, for us, this is a gold mine. I mean, this data is like, we just love to look into this every time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I changed up my entire episode. I think process. I think maybe I know when we started working together, PJ, but I think right before that too, I started becoming like super and pro consumption, because my episodes were like an hour long, right? I don't know who I thought I was like the Black Joe Rogan or something like that. I'm like, an hour and a half talking, and I was like, man, I was getting decent downloads, if you will, but then I went into the analytics and I saw people were dropping off at around the 30 to 35 minute mark, stuff like that. And so I realized, was like, dude, I need to shorten up my episodes. I need to get more concise. And I listened back to a couple of episodes, and I realized that, a good 20-30% of the episodes, I was just probably just talking about something, but not really staying on point. And, just like a lot of us do. But I had to realize, once again, my audience are retail leaders, right? Like a attention span of like a 5-year-old. Like, you got to let me know what I need to know. And then how does this apply to me? Like, I don't got all day, Steve. Like, I don't have all day. And I realized that I actually had to change it. And then once I changed it, I saw the consumption of my episodes get higher and higher and higher. And, I think, PJ, what do we average? We average like 38 minutes, I think, now for my retail leadership with Steve Worthy episodes.
Mhm.
And the consumption is probably in the high 70s, almost to 80s, if you will, for the majority, for if you the whole total body of work, if you will, from all of our episodes or whatever too. So that's why I am pro consumption, because I think, if I am an advertiser, I want to know, just like PJ talked about, I want to know that I could do something in the pre-roll, mid-roll, or 2 mid-rolls or whatever it is, and know that people are still going to be listening to that podcast episode, and they're not going to be falling off after 15, 20 minutes. Now, if your episode is 15, 20 minutes, that's great. and then you should have some really good consumption if your episodes. I mean, that means your content is really should be really tight and dialed in. But that's just Steve talking around that. Okay, I digress. I digress. All right, all right. Number four. Number four. I don't. Once again, if you guys are in the audience, if this is resonating with you, please, because we got several people here that are out there. So let me know let me know if you guys are tracking with us. Let me know if this is making sense. I know a lot of times, one of the things I've learned in live streaming, that even if you have really good numbers of people watching, right? Just because they're not engaging doesn't mean that they're listening. That means they're probably learning something. So those who are out there who are kind of new live streamers, don't be upset if people aren't like really kind of like throwing all tons of comments out, because they may be just learning and listening, probably taking some notes. So there we go. I've got to learn to kind of address that. Here we go. All right, most popular episodes. We got two more. This is this one, and we got one more, and that's it. Most popular episodes. Episode with the most downloads and highest listen time. I can go with this in a couple of different ways, but I'm gonna let the experts go. I'm gonna let Brian talk about the most popular. Well, let me ask you this, Brian. Out of all the episodes that you guys have produced, right? Which one did you think, just high level, which one did you think was going to be the most popular? And then which one was the most popular as it relates to like downloads and stuff like that? Did the two kind of align? I want to know.
Yeah. I think like there's a little bit of bias because you're the one producing it. But when you say which among the episode you feel would do best,
Yeah.
but I think when we did the first episode ever, the first time we produced the episode and we heard it, and we felt that this. I mean, me personally, I don't know about PJ, but I personally felt that this would be a high ranking, or maybe one of the favorite episodes that will be out there. And eventually, because throughout the season, the first season that we did, it ranked number one. I think it's most downloadable. Is that correct, PJ? The Bob Berg episode that we did, the first episode
That was our
that we
very
did was
favorite episode because it was the first one, but
yeah.
actually it was one of the most I mean highest performing ones along with Philip Van Dusen. But to date, I just
Well, I
checked
didn't check yet.
recently.
Yeah.
It was the episode of John Pagulayan because
Oh,
he
I
has
see.
a really engaged community as well. So
Mm.
that
Yeah,
he had two episodes actually, and those two performed the best.
I
Oh,
see.
nice,
Okay.
nice.
So yeah, that's good to know. So
Ye-
through time, when you put more episodes out there,
Yes.
you will see how it progressed. So yeah, this is a good metric. People may don't people not a lot of people would know what to do when they see this. Like, what will I do
Yeah,
with the best
yeah,
episode? So
yeah,
for
yeah.
me personally, when I see this, is that the first thing we do is we review this episode. What made this episode top? So PG just mentioned one because he is very engaged with his community. He's a good leader. He is a good influencer. So then that gives you an idea, or maybe I would get guests that do have a big following already. That's one
Mm,
marketing
mm,
strategy, or probably
mhm.
an episode planning strategy you will have in mind. Second is you might want to check what format did you use
Yes.
in that episode, right? So knowing the top or most download or highest listen time episode would give you uh, an idea on how to replicate that episode or even do better with that episode using the same kind of strategy or flow that you use. And you've always want to, as you mentioned, you want to be on top most of the time. So we did that two times with John. I should mention John Doe, Chris Doe. So
Just
how did we do
John
that? We
Doe.
top it.
John Doe.
I almost said John Doe.
Oh my
So there's
gosh.
something we must be doing something right. So learning what we did right is somewhere along the lines of getting the best episode or the best downloaded episode and then replicating it. So that's just the first thing that will go in mind for me.
Yeah.
PG can add to that. Probably.
Yeah, I want to, dovetail real quick because because we just talked, we were laughing about you about to call John Doe, but it's Chris Doe. I want PJ to tell real quick about the story that you did to get Chris Doe, because PJ hustled to get she hustled to get this interview with Chris Doe, man, and she was telling me the story.
Not John
I was
Doe.
like, dude. I was like, go ahead and quickly tell that story real quick, because I think it's going to end up one of your most popular episodes. Honestly, I think it's going to be one of the most popular ones.
You know what? I get this question all the time. Like, people ask me, how did you manage to get Christo? And you know what? I mean, maybe he has another answer, but I just asked.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But really, no, but that's what I did. I asked. But
Yeah.
before asking, even with Bob Berg, everybody got surprised that I got him for the very first episode. Philip Van Doos and everybody else.
And Steve Worthy.
Um,
Steve Worthy.
and Steve Worthy, of course.
Just saying.
You know what? You really have to build a relationship with them, because like, how do you do that? You follow their socials, you engage with their posts, you get you get genuinely interested with them, you become
Mm,
human. You just don't ask. You also, cheerlead, genuinely be very interested, genuinely again. And to go back to your question, so Chris Doe, I've been following him for a while, on all his channels, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. I follow him everywhere. And then when he had
that
an
sounded
event
creepy. That
here
sounded very
in the
creepy, but go ahead.
Philippines, I really, I had to borrow Brian's portable microphone, because I really wanted to interview him. And it took me so many touch points to get to that part where he said yes. I thought the first try would actually get me a yes, but no, I got a no the first time. And
Mm,
then
mm,
I made sure I didn't stop at the first no. I made sure that he knew me. He got to see my face more often during those 2 days and 3 days of that event. And I just showed up so many times because I want to make sure that he knew who I was. And
mm.
then it's also timing, because sorry, Christo, if you're listening, but I actually sent him a friend request on LinkedIn, and it was not accepted. I'm sure so many thousands of people do that, but he was not accepting it. So one time I saw him post on Twitter, and then I also happened to follow him on Instagram. So I was like, oh, he's online. This is my chance. So I wrote him this message, and, like, very genuinely, fangirling and telling him how much I admired his work and what he does. And then at the very end, I told him, with my partner's recommendations, I cannot take credit for all of that, but he said, tell him that we topped him twice. We beat him
Oh yeah,
twice.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
So actually once. That time it was once, but in total we beat him twice. So after that long letter, and I told him, by the way, we beat you once. And then I sent him a screenshot of that evidence that we actually beat him once. And then, I was not expecting him to reply, but like after, a few hours, he said yes. And, I was just
That's
shouting.
awesome.
I
That's
was
awesome.
so excited. And then when I told Steve, he was like, "What? How did you do?"
I was like,
He
I
was so
was
like, "How
I
did
was
you do
so
that?"
happy, and but so jealous, because I had about a year ago, maybe almost a year and a half ago, I don't know when it was, I had reached out to him. And no, I think, yeah, I had almost probably 6 months into Podcasters Live. And I was like, yo, whatever, I'm going for Chris Doe. I want him on my show. And I did the same exact things that you did. I didn't get an opportunity to see him speak, but I honestly felt like he actually was the one replying to me, because it sounded very Chris Doe-ish. like in his response, like on Instagram. Like he was just, it sounded like genuinely like a Chris Doe response. I was like, I know it's probably one of his people, but man, it sounded, I
Mhm.
was like, this sounds like Chris Doe like rejected me in a very nice way. Like, hey,
Mhm.
you keep growing. I checked out your stuff. I like this. I like this, what you're doing. Like, keep it growing. Maybe, come back, in about like 6, 8 months or whatever. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I was like, okay, all right. So it was just kind of inspiration a little bit. But then when PJ said she got him, I was like, what? I was like, whatever, man. I was like, whatever, dude. That was all. It was
No, but
awesome.
Steve, I mean, for those who are listening or watching, it's such an accomplishment to be able to interview, you know, the people that you really look up to, like
Yeah,
Bob
yeah,
Berg,
yeah.
Philip Van Dusen, Christo. And whenever you
Steve
interview people
Worthy.
you look up to,
Thank you,
it's
Brian.
like as if you're
Yeah,
having a
put it
free
on the list.
one-on-one
No,
coaching with them, you know?
just completely
No, but
forgets.
really, I got starstruck. It's just really, like I'm very grateful that they said yes, and they're really nice people as well. They're very genuine as well.
Awesome. And I honestly, because we're talking about most popular episodes, I think that's going to end up being one of your most popular ones when you guys you didn't release that one yet, did you?
Very soon.
Yeah.
Very soon.
This coming June. I mean, are we in June now? Yeah, June. Yeah.
No, not yet. It's yeah. Okay, dude.
Or May. Yeah.
That one. I think that one's gonna be. You know,
June.
yeah. You guys heard it here first. June, their episode with Christo is coming out, and I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be number 2. I think the one with Steve Worthy is gonna be number 1, and then I think
That will be on
Christo's.
July. Are we
That's gonna
doing
be. Oh
Steve
yeah.
on July?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I want to see the
All right.
analytics on
Yeah,
that one.
July.
I want to see them side by side, Christo, Steve Worthy. I want to see.
Yeah.
Me, and then maybe yeah. Then what I'll do,
And then
what I
you know what happens,
yeah.
Steve? When we look into the analytics and you top him, we screenshot and we send him.
Boom.
Can you be now the guest of the show?
That's what
Boom.
I'm
There you
talking
go.
about. That's what I'm talking about. You were reading my mind, man. You were reading my mind. All right, let's get to number 5, man. Then we got some honorable mentions. Apps used by listeners. A lot of people don't pay attention to this one. They probably bypass it on their host sites, and they're like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. But I think it actually provides some really good insight, and it highlights the various listening apps used for each episode, whether it's your phone, desktop, but also I guess I should have put on here too, if it's an Apple or Android. That piece right there is probably the most important part. The not just where, but also the apps, but also the type of phone. Because I'm going to get into that here in a second after I'll let these guys talk, because that's the important piece. And they may just go ahead and say it anyway, because we're all on the same page. So PJ, when you think about apps used by listener, how does this resonate with you? And then how do you kind of go about kind of looking at this, and then kind of extrapolating the information out of it for the
Mhm.
success of your podcast and your clients?
This is very important. Because, for example, most people listen on Spotify. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever you do your series, it's important, to really, um, what do you call this? Direct them to where it will be easier for them to consume your content. Because if let's
Yeah.
say you keep on saying like Apple, 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 Apple without mentioning Spotify, even if I was the one who want to listen to it, and there's no way I can listen to Apple because I'm on Spotify, I use Android, then you lose a listener. So you really have to be mindful about these things, like what device they listen. Do they listen on their phones? Do they listen on their computer? Is it Apple? Is it Spotify? These are important data, so that when you plan out your marketing as well, you know how to communicate these information. For example, if your audiences use Apple a lot, or maybe it's their first time to listen to Apple, using that app. Whenever you have, let's say a launch party, or
Mm,
you really
mm,
want to get
mm.
engagement from people, you also have to know how to instruct them on how to leave a review, a
Yes.
rating, because some people they don't know how to do that. Or Spotify, it has to be in relation to what they're using at the end of the day. Don't make it very difficult for your audiences. If they listen more on this app, then promote that more, educate them how to do a rating or review on that app. It works both ways. You're getting their feedback, and at the same time, you're making it more frictionless for them,
Mm, mm,
because that's what we already use. So
mm.
it's pointless if you promote other things. Of course, you want your listeners as well. But when you look at your metrics and you see this that they listen mostly on this app, so talk about that more. Do your CTAs using that more because you want it to be easier for them.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you, Ashia, and then they're both are kind of sitting there listening to taking notes, and Shia like the fact that we put the the definitions up, and why they're important. So appreciate that. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Brian. What's your thoughts on apps used by listeners?
Yeah, I definitely agree with PJ. And just to add to what she said, and summarizing, we can do that by like the apps that used by listeners to listen. This is a way that we can optimize the platform, right? By knowing which
Yeah,
apps your
yeah,
audience
yeah.
uses, you can optimize your podcast presence and the kind of presentation that you do on the platform. Because these apps or these mobile devices may have different functionalities with them, especially when
Yes.
Apple has a new uh, iPhone and all that. So knowing that is very important because you can have app specific promotions as well, right? And
Mm,
this is also good to know for those of you who are starting podcasting that there are specific ad platforms for Spotify and there are platforms advertising for Apple. So if you see that there are a lot of people listening in an Apple or on an iPhone, then probably you can run an ad in there, or maybe the other way around because you
mm,
want more
mm.
people to listen to Spotify. Then maybe you can strengthen your marketing efforts to attracting more people in Spotify. So it can go either way. So what you're really trying to do here is to improve your user experience. In listening, you're considering your user experience when listening to your podcast. You
Mm,
understand
mhm.
the apps that where they prefer to, and you tailor your episodes or their user experience through what you're doing. Because again, it's very important to because what you're doing is not for your. I mean, for us, and it should be also
Yeah,
something that you can look into. Why you're doing your podcast is not for yourself, but for your listeners, right?
yeah.
So it's all for them. We're doing podcasters live because we want to share our knowledge. People can learn from what we're doing here. And if we add value to them, then they'll be happy and we can be happy as well on our end. So yeah, that's basically what I think about this.
Nice, man. Nice. I think about it in the context of like, you know, people listen to podcasts in different ways, and they also listen to different types of podcasts in different ways, right? So like Pod News and there's another one, Daily Boost. They're both shorter podcasts, right? I listen to them while I'm working out, right? Very quick, right? And they're on my phone. There are other podcasts that I listen to that may be a little longer. I may listen to them on my desktop because I'm sitting down. And right, so you have to kind of utilize that idea of when are people listening to your podcast, but more importantly, how are they listening to your podcast? Right. So I think about it in that context of understanding that information. And I'm not saying that you actually have to change your structure of your podcast to suit somebody that's working out compared to somebody that's sitting down on their desktop. It's just really good information for you to kind of know, and also maybe possibly from an advertising standpoint to be able to bake in advertisements based on how people are actually listening to your podcast. The last point that I want to make about this is that we hear it all the time, and I know PJ and Brian, you guys hear it all the time. Everybody always wants to say, "Hey, if you want to check out our podcast, go to Apple." Right? And it's like, dude, well, here in America, there's about 70% of people actually, have iPhones. The other 30% is Android. In the rest of the world, it is around 70, maybe 75% Android, 25% iPhone. So you are automatically limiting I feel your growth with your podcast by pointing them to one or another. I'm a big advocate of having your own website for your podcast and pointing them there, right? Because you'll still get credit for the download if you're using a plugin from your host, from your Captivate, Buzzsprout, or whatever. You're still going to get credit for your download, and you're still going to be able to get all the analytics associated with that episode. But you are cutting off your nose to spite your face if you're just like, yeah, go to Apple, I'm like, dude, I got Android, right? Okay, go to Spotify. Yeah, go to Spotify. By the way, it's like, well, dude, you've already turned me off by telling me go to Apple, and I, people, because people with Androids always, they are, and they're always like, well, Apple people think they're better than the people with Android, and then and vice versa. And so we don't want to do that. And I don't want to have a phone war here, but I don't know. Those are just my two like kind of little ad lib thoughts around apps used and how listener behavior, kind of play a role as well. We have a couple of honorable mentions that we wanted to just kind of like put up there on the screen, and if anybody had any questions about any of these different metrics, please put it in the comments. Your thoughts or your questions or anything like that as well too. When you guys look at any of these, pick, if you want to pick one. This is kind of like this is like a game show on TV, right? Pick one and briefly talk about it a little bit, for the audience. Brian, go first. You go first.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with audience, age, and gender. So this is something that you might also want to consider, especially if you're in the initial stages of the season, you're just starting out, and when you see this metric, if this already shows up, maybe you're middle in the season, in the middle of the season, wherein you probably have like 10 episodes out or 5 episodes out. So this metric will show up. This will give you an idea, and we had this conversation before with PJ. I don't know if PJ remembers, but we were having this previous podcast called the TGS. So that's
The jump seat.
the jump seat. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's a different kind of podcast, but when we saw the age and the gender, wow, we didn't expect that this people are this age group is listening to us, and
Yeah.
it was mostly all women, and and all that. So knowing this in the middle or maybe early, if the information is available, would give you a good prep for the upcoming episodes that you want to make. That since these are the kind of people and age, if you want to stick with this
Yeah.
gender and age, because at the beginning of, before, when you do the season planning, of course you already have in mind your listener avatar. If this matches your listener avatar, then all good. You continue with whatever you plan out. But if it doesn't, if it didn't match your listener avatar, maybe you need to do a little change of format, or change of ideas moving forward in an episode. So it's really important, because all of these metrics that we're talking about is for us to improve and be better in what we do. So we just have to be mindful of all of these, even this honorable mentions, because they're like very minute detail, but this can make a big impact to your podcast. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
Agreed. All right, all right, PJ. Spin the wheel And I should actually had a wheel. That would have been pretty dope. Spin the wheel, and whatever one it lands on, you talk about. Now, go ahead. Go ahead and pick one.
Um, well, b- I'm going to pick probably ratings and reviews.
Mm,
I mean, these are great, but again, don't be so fixated if you don't get a rating or a review. You work hard for this as well, because you really have to include this in your CTAs. You have to talk about it. You have to instruct your listeners as well on what to do, because you just have to tell them that you want this.
mhm.
And why is this important? Ratings and reviews. It's like buying a product, right? Before you buy a product, you want to see reviews.
Mm,
uh,
yeah,
it's a deciding factor as well. One
yeah,
of the deciding factors for, because there's a lot. The last time I checked, there are like more than 5 million podcasts out there, or podcast episodes, and it's a very competitive space. So many factors that you have to consider, and this is also one of them, because
yeah,
it helps the listener decide, should I listen to this podcast? They want to get like a snippet of what other listeners thought about the episode or the podcast itself. So it also helps a lot, to get more listeners to your podcast. But then again, if you don't get a lot, you just really have to employ a lot of techniques as well,
yeah,
marketing
yeah,
efforts, and your content has to be good. At the end of the day, it has to be very good,
yeah.
for people to mind leaving a rating and review. And all these things that we've talked about today, I just want to say that, uh, don't get overwhelmed, because of, there's a lot of data that you have to think about. But again, if you want to put out content, if you want to do this in the long run, then you really have to know these things. It will
Hmm.
take some time, but you have to know these things, because all of these things come together. They're all important, actually. So it will take some time, but keep going, because once you use all these information for your podcast, it's gonna be so worth it. So yeah, worth it,
Worth
worthy.
it, worth it, worth it, worth it, worthy. PJ's such a mom, right? Brian and I like matter of fact business, and but no, it's gonna be okay. You'll just, and Brian are like, no, this is. We're like, so PJ's balancing us out. She's balancing us out, right? I'm gonna I'll do dynamic ad insertion, and then we'll close. But I like that's new, right? This whole dynamic ad insertion piece. So if you don't know, you're just starting podcasting, or if you haven't really thought about it, you got to think about it in the context of, um, being able to have a pre-roll, mid-roll, and then also a post-roll, which is where you can insert ads, whether it's stuff from yourself or it's you actually have advertisements as well. So I think it's important for you to kind of think about it in that context. The your hosting site, and I use Buzzsprout, right? I'm gonna probably do an episode probably in a couple of weeks around like the top 5, if you will, hosting sites. And honestly, there's not a lot of variations, in them. There just really isn't. This person will do something new, then this person will just end up doing the same thing. So there's not a lot. It's just a lot of personal preference, to be honest with you. But they have a metric now where you can actually see, the open rate, if you will, of your dynamic ads when people have actually listened to it, right? They can probably skip through it if they wanted to, but it actually provides information of when people actually listen to the ads that you've actually inserted in your podcast. So if you wanted to think about it from an advertisement standpoint, utilizing the statistics, for that, as well. We promote and we put our own stuff in our retail leadership stuff, our own coaching programs. And so for us, it's more of a matter of like looking to see what people are listening to, and if it's resonating. You can always change up the dynamic ad insertions, right? You can run a campaign for something and run it for like 2 months, and then insert the ads, and then you can pull it out, right? So there's so many different things that you can utilize with ad insertion to grow your business and different things like that as well too. Oh my goodness. Okay, you both have been except for Brian. Brian's been okay. He hasn't really added a lot of value tonight. Tonight for you guys, this morning for us.
I'm not worthy tonight.
You're not.
I'm
You
just being Brian.
you said it, not me. It is what it is. No. Well, give PJ already kind of did it, but I'm gonna ask you to do it again. Just give some closing thoughts to. I know we covered a lot of bases, and I on these Saturday Lives we tend to do that because I don't care. I just want to make sure people get information, and hopefully they're taking it and utilizing it for their overall success as well. But I do want you to kind of talk a little bit about, just provide like some closing thoughts, and then I'll close this out, and then we can move forward and go about our day. Brian, you go first. And then Lady's gonna be last because PJ's gonna say something super dope and profound, and I'm recording this, PJ. So whatever you say, so we have a running joke. We have a running joke. So PJ and I, we meet weekly on like podcasts and content and stuff for both my podcasts, and the tendency is like we'll be talking, and I'll go off on a good tangent about something, and it'll be like dope. And I'll just be dropping like gems and just like poof, poof, like all these like nuggets. And then I'm like, yo, dude, did you? I need to hear that back, because sometimes when you say something really dope in the moment, you just you're like, oh, I want to write that down. But we're on Zoom, so I'm like, yo, did you record that? Oh no, Steve, I didn't record it. I'm like, yo,
I always forget.
like, dude, I just dropped. I just did like $5,000 like worth of speaking engagement stuff, like $10,000 worth of speaking engagement stuff right there. So now the running joke is, oh, hold up, before we start, so you hit the record button. So
Because it's always like a podcast, right? Steve and I, whenever we're having a meeting, it still feels like a podcast. So we really have to record those, nuggets.
oh my gosh,
To
I know.
record it,
Yes,
to write it
yes.
down somewhere.
Yeah, so don't worry, PJ. The jewels that you drop at the end, we are recording. So, go ahead, Brian. You go ahead and start first with some closing thoughts.
Yeah, before I say that, probably this is not an advertising for Ecamm, but I know Steve is using Ecamm. So for Ecamm, you have to hit stream, record, and virtual cam just to make sure everything goes right.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. 100%.
Okay. So closing thoughts. All right. So we've talked about metrics and the crucial role that it plays in podcasting. So it's very important to understand the performance and the impact of your podcast. So these metrics that we've discussed, they provide valuable insights into your audience, the content effectiveness that you do, and of course the overall podcast growth that you would always want to happen over time. So my closing thoughts, number one probably is to choose the relevant metrics. There's a lot that we've discussed, and probably these are the top 5. There are more if you go into your dashboard. So focus on the metrics. For me, you just have to focus in like 3 or 4 of them that will align to your podcast goals and objectives. Again, going back to what we discussed earlier, planning is crucial podcasting journey. So when you plan that correctly at the very beginning, your strategic launch plan or your season planning, you always have your goals and objectives. And whenever you have that, you can always look into the metrics that matches those goals. So consider those. Total download streams, they're what you're looking for, your unique listeners, your demographics, because you have an avatar, retention, which is our favorite, and of course, everything else that you might want to consider. So that's something that just top of mind that I can share. And what else? Keep up with the platform, because this industry keeps on just changing, especially with the rise of AI and everything else going on. We need to keep up with platform specific metrics. They can, as Steve mentioned, he's got this new ad dynamic ad insertion metric, which is really good. I didn't know that. I've used Buzzsprout for some of my clients, and it's just my first time to know that.
Mm.
In fact, there's also one thing that we're exploring. This is not also. I am not in any way getting anything out of this, but Casted, if you just can look at this, it's quite an expensive platform to do subscriptions with. But they have this beautiful metric, Casted.us, that lets you see, because it's basically more of a business to business kind of a platform that they're
Mm.
catering to. So they let you see who among the big companies are listening to your podcast. That's
Mm.
something,
Mm.
mind blowing. Like if you're targeting businesses,
Wow.
they have that kind of metric, like who among these big companies that you targeted. I mean, and then it goes directly to your CRM, and maybe you can get in touch with them later. So
Oh, wow.
that's something mind blowing, right? These new things that are happening. So these are called platform specific metrics that may be or may not be available in the platform that you choose. So just be mindful about this. You stay informed about the specific metrics, and analytics providers, third parties like Chartable are always improving, and they're providing different kind of analytics as well. So try to understand the data they provide, and of course, you can always ask Steve Worthy about these developments in his page or wherever he has his website. So it's worth the time of looking into Steve's podcast as
It's
well
worth the.
to keep yourself updated. Yeah.
Oh, but
So yeah, I think I wouldn't take much of your time because PJ has more to add, but those are the two things that probably you would need to do with all the data that we've discussed today.
Yeah,
So again,
dude.
thank you. If this is closing, I'd like to thank Steve, and
Oh.
though I'm not worthy, I'm still being Brian here. So yeah.
I appreciate you, man, dude. That's a dope like metric to know, like which companies are actually like listening, to your podcast. Like just being able to
Yeah.
like have that, and then company ABC, and then like go on LinkedIn, right, and maybe connect with somebody at that company, right, and just like how PJ start talking about the whole Chris Doe thing, and so she started making connections.
Yeah.
Like just being able to have that information. Now you're loaded for bear. You don't go in there and be like, "Hey, my name's Steve Worthy. I heard you listen. I see that you listen to my podcast." And it's not. You don't do it that way. But you go and you start to make the connections. But now you're loaded with some information. So, oh man, that one's. I'm gonna have to send that one over to Buzzsprout for them to kind of figure out how to do that one. That's actually pretty. That's really good. That's really good, man. All right, PJ. We saved the best for last. Save the best for last. What you got for us?
At the end of the day, all these information, it can be overwhelming, but we have to make data-driven decisions. I
Mm.
remember a person in my network was telling me a story earlier that she wanted to revamp the show because she couldn't understand the hosts, but she may not be the target listener for that
Mm.
show,
Mm.
right? So we can't just change things on a whim. We always have to back it up with data. Starting a podcast is an investment, not just time, money, everything. Like you pour out every time you record, you pour out yourself. It's a commitment. And so when you want to stay in this industry in the long run and successfully, you really have to take these information, um, and not just check once. You have to check them regularly. If you're
Yes.
number one now,
Yes.
you may not be number one tomorrow. And maybe your podcast, the most popular podcast you have is this now, but maybe next week it's not, because audiences, they also change their preferences.
Yeah.
And it's an attention economy.
Mm.
But I also like what Steve keeps telling me as well, and whenever we have conversations, there are a lot of podcasts out there. There are a lot of shows, but at the end of the day, you also have to be true to yourself,
Mm.
like about your brand, what you stand up for, and you know, giving that to your audience, that genuine desire to help others with your knowledge, your experience, but also taking into account how they want it delivered to them,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
they want it to be accepted, use their language, so that you align, they understand what you're telling them. So all this information, we talked about a lot of terminologies. Don't let it overwhelm you. It takes some time, some
Mm,
experience, some
mm,
research as well.
yep.
One thing that we maybe could also talk about more in the future, or you could research as a podcaster, or if you're planning to start. Never neglect market research and competitor analysis, because it's a
Mm,
treasure trove of information.
yeah.
Because when you want to start, you don't have this information yet. You will get to know all this information when you already have
Yeah.
some episodes out. But if you are watching or you're listening to this and you just want to start, market research and competitor analysis those are good ways to start, so that you know what already works, because sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
No.
You just have to put your personal touch, your own flavor, right? Your own
Yeah.
flair.
Yeah.
And it's just constant researching and looking at data. You'll get used to it, and you just have to always be what do you call this, on the lookout for information that will help you grow your own show.
100%.
That's it.
Pro tip, um, is that if people always, I'll run out of content, I don't know what to talk about. One of the things that I do is, I will, if there's a conference, like, so in retail, if there are so many different conferences that take place. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll go to the conference website and I'll look at the speakers and I'll look at the topics that they're talking about. And it is a great way to get more information, because you're not gonna be there for the actual, like, top, speech, but man, the topic could tell you a lot about what they're going to be talking about. It's like, ooh, I like that topic, that's going to resonate with my audience. And then, like PJ said, you can utilize the topic but put a spin on it for your audience, right? If it's a a female oriented podcast, right? You can go to female conferences and look at some of the topics that are actually going to be talked about, right? You're not stealing. You're like, oh, that's research. It is research information. So there, it's just a pro tip. It just came to me. But as PJ was talking about, content and different things like that, just to um, make sure that you don't run out of content. There are so many different ways for you to actually kind of create content and get information, do research as well too. Thank you both so much for being here. I appreciate you both so much, man. You guys have helped me grow as a person, grow as a podcaster, and as a live streamer, holding me accountable to so many different things, professionally, personally, and just support wise, all of that. And I appreciate the knowledge, and I really hope, and I know that everybody who was here tonight or this morning, depending on where you are, they got so much information out of it from you guys. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I'm gonna close us out here, and stay. Don't hang up. I'm gonna come back. Stay in the green room, if you will. All right, give me a sec. All right. What's so much information, so much data, so much content. And I know we went a little long today. We typically do sometimes on Saturdays, but just wanted to get that information out there to you. So if you're looking at this in a replay and you got something out of this, please make sure you go ahead and put it in the comments. And thank you so much for everybody that's been subscribing to YouTube for us and connecting with us on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Just really appreciate you guys so much. And we know that these Saturday trainings are resonating with people because you guys are telling us that they are, telling me that they are. So we're going to continue to do this. So many metrics, so much stuff to do with. I think it's all about balance. It's about understanding, like Brian said, understanding what your goals are for your podcast, and then trying to find the data that's going to help you with propelling those goals forward, right? It's all about the content. It's all about making sure that whatever it is that you're putting out there that your audience resonates with, not so much just for you to say, oh my gosh, I feel really good about this. That's cool that you may feel good about it, and then you don't get any listeners. The goal is that, do you feel good about it, and will this resonate with my audience? Period. Right? We are in this business to help people, not just ourselves, but to help people get from where they are to where they want to be. That's the I think one of the biggest things that I love about podcasting is that aspect. So thank you for joining us for Podcasters Live here on Saturday morning, our live training. We will see you on Wednesday night for our live podcast, and then again on next Saturday as well. So Wednesday, 7 o'clock, we will see you there. Have a great rest of your Saturday, or for PJ and those guys, have a great rest of their Saturday night. Talk to you guys soon. God bless.